Are the majority of your surgeries hand surgeries?
Yes.
How many hand surgeries would you say you've performed in your career?
Over 25 years, thousands.
Have you seen finger injuries similar to the one sustained by Mr. Depp in Australia?
Yes.
And have you evaluated injuries like that?
Yes.
Have you treated injuries like that?
Yes.
Have you operated on fingers that looked like that?
Yes.
How many times?
Hundreds, if not more.
What have you reviewed? Just general categories of information have you reviewed at our request in this case?
So a tremendous amount of material. I reviewed the video deposition and trial testimony of Mr. Depp regarding the injury, the medical records from Australia, the photographs of the injury from Australia and Los Angeles, texts and emails, the deposition of Dr. Kipper.
Dr. Moore, based on your analysis, did Mr. Depp's finger injury happen as a result of a vodka bottle being thrown at him?
No.
And what is the basis for that opinion?
Medical data is not consistent with what we see in the described injury pattern or in the clinical photographs. And the mechanism described would have almost certainly led to severe nail injury.
So what you're saying is that something coming from the top could not have left the nail intact and yet caused injury from the tip of the finger underneath the nail.
I believe.
Does Mr. Depp's description of what happened line up with the undisputed photographic evidence that you've reviewed?
No.
And in your decades of practice, when you see a comminuted fracture like this, what are some things that have typically caused it?
So crush mechanisms could be slammed in a drawer, caught between two logs in the fireplace, car door, sliding glass door. Those are all any mechanism that squeezes the finger between two hard opposing surfaces could create this type of injury.
In the statements of Mr. Depp that you reviewed, how did he describe what happened to the alleged bottle when it hit the bar?
I believe he said it exploded, shattered.
If a bottle had exploded near his finger in the way that he alleges, what would you expect to see in the documents that you have reviewed?
I think that the physicians did a good job of documenting the presentation, the appearance of the wound. They did not document the presence of any glass shards, and there were no other associated injuries elsewhere on the hand. Well, I think in the setting of a glass explosion like that, where there's multiple fragments and the tip of the fingers cut off, you would anticipate that there would be other lacerations.
Did you review the documentation in the medical records from the hospital in Australia?
Yes.
Did any of those providers report retrieving glass from the wound?
No.
What about any glass near the site of the injury?
No.
What about any glass in other parts of the hand?
No.
What about any glass in any of the other fingers?
No.
Have you ever seen an injury associated with an alleged glass explosion where no other glass was found on any part of the patient's body or clothing or anything?
No.
You said you reviewed Mr. Depp's video deposition, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you said you reviewed Mr. Depp's testimony at this trial, correct?
That's correct.
And you testified that Mr. Depp demonstrated that his hand was flat on a surface, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's not entirely accurate, is it though? Your description in this courtroom was that it was laying flat, and I think you've done that now twice. But in your deposition, you testified that his fingers were actually hanging over the bar. Isn't that correct?
That perhaps I misstated in one of the two descriptions. However, that does not substantially change my opinion of.
Dr. Moore, just at the outset, your billing rate for providing deposition testimony is $1,000 per hour?
That's correct.
All right. And your billing rate for providing trial testimony is $5,000 per day?
That's correct.
You were retained in this case by Ms. Hurd's legal team, correct?
Correct.
And over the last few years, you've provided expert services for one of Ms. Hurd's law firms on at least 2 other cases, right?
That's correct, yes.
Dr. Moore, is it fair to say that you have no personal knowledge as to how Mr. Depp injured his finger in Australia, correct?
Correct.
All right. You also never personally examined Mr. Depp's finger, did you?
Correct.
You didn't examine Mr. Depp's finger at the time it was injured?
I did not.
And you never provided any medical treatment to Mr. Depp in connection with his finger injury, did you?
I did not.
Now, you've testified that you identified Mr. Depp's finger injury as a crush injury, correct?
Correct.
And a crush injury to a finger can occur when a foreign object hits the finger, right?
Yes.
And based on the pictures that you reviewed of Mr. Depp's finger injury, you cannot determine what particular object caused the injury to his finger, yes?
I can't determine the exact object, but I can determine that it's unlikely that it was sustained in the manner described.
A bottle is a foreign object, isn't it? So you can't rule out that the injury to Mr. Depp's finger was caused by a vodka bottle, correct?
Well, I can't rule out that a vodka bottle caused the injury, but I can rule out that it was caused in the manner described in his testimony.
Do you remember giving testimony in this case, Dr. Moore? And you were under oath, correct? And that was on March 22nd, 2022, yes?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Question, but you can't rule it out completely, right? Answer, I can't rule anything out completely. I can't rule out that he caught it in the door, cut it with a knife, or slammed it in the car door. Or, again, as Dr. Gilmer said, we can't definitively say what caused this injury. Did I read that correctly? So you can't rule out that the injury was caused by a car door either. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. But it's your testimony sitting here today that you can rule out that the injury was caused by a vodka bottle. Is that your testimony?
My testimony is that I can rule out the injury as caused by the mechanism described by Mr. Depp in his deposition. Quite likely that the initial mechanism described at the time of presentation of the accordion doors would classically create this injury pattern. You know, the hand up in front. If you picture accordion doors as the edge is closed, if the hand's up, the palm is exposed. If the door's pushed,
But,
and the
Dr.
hinge
Moore,
closes about the fingers.
I understand that. But my question is,
I think it's important that they understand that.
this is the time for me to ask you questions. Right now, let's try my question.
Okay.
You can't definitively say what caused the injury to Mr. Depp's fingers. Yes or no?
No.
Okay. And your analysis is based on an understanding of how Mr. Depp described the exact positioning of his finger at the time of the injury. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. When you perform traumatic finger surgeries, you inquire about the cause of the injuries, correct?
Correct.
And your best information on that is typically just the self-report of the patient, yes?
Correct.
And your assumption is that the patient is trying to get care. Because the patient is trying to get care, that person, that patient, is generally telling the truth, right?
You would hope so.
Yeah, because it's important the jury hears this. So in forming your opinion, did you consider Dr. Kipper's deposition testimony that while Dr. Kipper was providing emergency treatment for Mr. Depp's finger injury in Australia in the driveway of the house, Mr. Depp told him that his finger was injured when Miss Heard threw a vodka bottle at him?
I don't recall that from the deposition.
Okay. Have you ever seen this picture before, Dr. Moore?
No.
So you're not aware that this is the bar area where Mr. King testified he found Mr. Depp's finger?
No.
Okay. Do you see that broken vodka bottle in the back corner near the...
Yes.
Do you see the blood drops on the floor?
Yes.
Have you seen this picture before, Dr. Moore?
I have not.
So you're not aware that this is also a picture from the bar area where Mr. King testified he found Mr. Depp's finger?
Correct.
So you didn't consider any of this evidence in rendering your opinion about how Mr. Depp injured his finger in Australia, did you?
I did not.
Okay. Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Redirect. Yes, sir.
ومن هنا انتهت حلقة اليوم. أتمنى أن تكونوا قد استفدتم معا، وأن نكون دائما عند حسن ظنكم المرجو المشاركة والتعليق وتفعيل زر الجرس ليصلكم كل جديد. تحياتي الخالصة من القلب، إلى اللقاء.